Hey everybody, it's Baileywiki, and I'm joined by my team and also by another familiar face that you guys have seen. Hey guys, how you doing?
Great.
Doing great.
Doing pretty well.
Great. This session, this is a special session. This is myself, Zephyr, Swift, and also Joby from the Familiars. And we're going to walk through really kind of a behind the DM screen look at the one shot that we did with Tropos and Iron Monk and everybody else a couple of weeks ago. We thought, you guys saw the gameplay, but what might be more valuable to you as DMs and GMs is like what went into making that happen? What challenges did we have? What is some of the behind the scenes stuff? And really like some kind of the theory and things that we walked in there with, things that we would do differently and things that we would do again. So this is really just kind of us kind of narrating over, maybe scrubbing through a little bit of the one shot to basically kind of unpack that thinking for you guys. So hopefully you enjoy it. Does that sound like a plan, fellas?
Awesome.
Great.
Sounds good.
Well, first of all, I mean, I thought that was a really fun session. I don't know about you guys, but it was really cool to be a player again. And to really use some of the technology and the other stuff that we push and that we recommend and that we really kind of get out there into the ecosystem and doing it with the people who invented the technology itself. Even though Ripper wasn't involved, he had a lot to do in the precursor to that show happening. So I don't know. I think that whole like meta thing was really cool to watch. I don't know what you guys think, but.
It was a lot of fun, and I thought it was particularly entertaining. Up until just a few minutes before we started, Monk was recommending some of his modules or requesting things for us to add in. So that was kind of fun, being right there with, like you said, the people who've invented a lot of these great automation modules, being able to get their input and expertise on it as we were getting ready.
Yeah, and I was a little nervous. I know Tropos is a purist, right? He made the VTT that he wants to play on, and then we go and add all of the stuff to it, right? And like just walking in and the prep, where he's like, "Okay, we're using automation." I was like, "Yeah, we're going to use automation." Was pretty leery, and ironically, one of I think the only player who had problems with the automation was a Tropos. So it was, of course,
that was the
poetic
unfortunate
justice. Part. Yeah. So, right on. Well, so what I thought we would do is we kind of came with some ideas and things that we wanted to talk about. I certainly have my list, but what I thought we would start with is, Zephyr, this is kind of a question for you. What are some of the main like modules that people saw in play here?
Yeah. So the module list is just over 70 active modules, which I know sounds like a lot, but there's a lot of interdependencies and stuff there. I'll have the full list in the description for this video, so check out down there. I think the really big things are, obviously, we mentioned automation for combat, so that's going to be MIDI QOL and dynamic active effects, and that whole suite of modules that kind of goes into automating combat for 5e. Some other big ones, I think, you see at a few points, there's Argon Combat HUD, and I also used Token Action HUD to handle token actions and everything without having to have sheets open. And then I would say Combat Carousel is also a big one. Yeah, you see that in all of the different combat pieces we had. Of course, Monk's myriad of modules,
right.
In particular, active tiles, and his common display was huge for hopefully cutting down a bit of your workload. Joby, you can speak to how helpful that was.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was fully starstruck the whole time, but that was a super helpful one for me as a streamer.
Yeah. It's really nice how it just follows the whole party and everything. There's a few times where you might want to take manual control over it, but that was really useful. And then, of course, our kind of capstone piece at the very end was using Ripper's 3D canvas and the level suite and everything. And that is just a showstopper. And it's really crazy how well 3D canvas handles combat and does everything there. We had a few hiccups along the way, but we got through it. And I think we had a really cool result with all of those pieces in place.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think about all the technology that we used? Did it work? Would you do it again? I have my opinions, but I'm holding back until I hear yours. I don't want to taint your
Yeah.
opinions.
I would say personally, I feel like the loadout of modules that we ran, I am pretty happy with overall. There's maybe a few different things that I didn't leverage a whole bunch that I would cut back on. And I think the really big thing is I kind of made a mistake in terms of prepping everyone for the adventure in not asking for character sheets sooner and not doing a session 0 earlier, either in a couple different groups. Obviously, we were spread out across I think every person was in a different time zone, so that makes that a little challenging. And so I think a little bit more advanced time to be able to double check all of the combat automation would have been good. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the selection of modules that we had. There's just a few different changes in design and planning philosophy that I would take into the next time we would do one of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say just as this, observer of the game as it was going on and just trying to make it look and sound cool. I just really like the ability to jump between 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions, and especially with everything that Ripper's been doing and Swift has been doing, and just the way that these modules are beginning to really like sing together. It's just like very immersive, and I like, as a DM, the ability to just control the frame of what my players are seeing and how they're seeing it. And I think that the more these modules are just, they're getting advanced every day. I'm getting pings from Ripper every single day about new stuff that's coming out. It's amazing. And it's just really exciting. That's all working within Foundry too, is fantastic.
Yeah, this moment, I've got the moment we entered the first 3D scene, or the 3D scene, really the climactic battle at the end. It was just like unequivocally a cool moment. Everybody sort of had the collective, oh my gosh, this is 3D. We're playing it. Yeah. Oh, there's my mini. It's in 3D. This is great. And I am not somebody who's like, okay, every VTT game should just only and always go to 3D. In fact, I don't think that should be the case. I think we as GMs get this whole palette of paint to work with, and this is just kind of one of those paints that like fits really well with particular moments. And I like intermingling the two, right? Playing a whole 2D game and then culminating as 3D. It was just emotionally, it was really gratifying for me. But other things I found gratifying is just like the combat automation, right? And I know this from playing my games, but just being able to like click the button and it rolls the dice and the dice fly across the screen and it sort of takes care of things for you. I felt like the velocity of the game was just, so much better. I know Atropos can do that math in his head when he's rolling, right? But, for me, being able to like automate things was just really spectacular.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah, and to touch on to that point a little bit, obviously we have a lot of really experienced people who DM a lot, play a lot, use Foundry a lot. Even if we didn't have automation going, we probably would have been moving through combat at a pretty decent clip. That's not always the case if you have newer players or anything, because honestly, half of learning any RPG system is where do you find the important information on the sheet and going and hunting that down. Automation takes that out of the equation because, let's face it, if you know exactly or roughly what a spell does, you don't need to know all of the different dice you need to go grab. You just know, this is my big damaging area of effect spell. That's not really like a skill that you need to develop, and it can kind of get in the way and slow things down sometimes. So I think automation is really valuable from that perspective as well.
Agreed.
I think the other thing that I just find really gratifying is the animation, right? So the automated animations, JB2A, all the work they're doing. And now the spell animations and things that we're seeing in 3D Canvas, kind of mirroring that. In fact, I think Ripper just released a whole new sort of wave of animations in 3D canvas, right? Where you can, watch the arrows fly and the swords swing and stuff like that. And I find that also very gratifying. It makes you feel powerful as a player when you have that spell that's kind of your thing, and you see it, connect. And I don't know. In fact, I think we might even see one here streaming over the stream here. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, right there.
And it's just fun. It's a powerful feeling, and it's a special feeling when you have that spell that kind of animates and does the thing.
I feel like you can see Monk start to get into it, and that's the cool thing.
Right.
Like, I feel like everything in the game, bells and whistles that we can do here now with these awesome modules, that you want that look on your player's face, that means that they're leaning forward. And I like what you said about the velocity of the game too, that all of this automation, and I mean, like, just simply like mathematically has things just move at a faster clip. But then when you get that cool animation, I mean, gets my blood up. I don't know about you guys.
You feel like you're casting the spell if you've got the cool animation. You feel that in a way that you don't get when you're just seeing the numbers.
Yeah.
It's a very visceral effect when you press a button and then something happens on the screen, where normally it would all be in your imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Zephyr and I were talking about this, and there was somebody that put in the comments like, this is for people who don't have imaginations or something like that. And, there's some truth to that. When you're sitting around a table together and you're feeling the energy of the room and you guys are role-playing together and all that stuff, there's a really special place for theater of the mind. Once you move everybody online and we're starting to do things from our bedrooms or our kitchens where things are distracting us and we're on different time zones, for me as a DM, it's DM'd virtual games like that. I feel kind of an encumbrance to like actually bring a little bit something for them to pay attention to while another player is taking their turn, kind of thing. And so, some of these things like 3D and these effects, they just sort of build it in for you so that you don't have to try to, dancing bear your way through the whole game as a GM.
Yeah. I think another thing that's really awesome about these modules like automated animations is that while there's global settings, each player can also customize it. So we might both be throwing firebolts at enemies, but my firebolt might look slightly differently than yours because I'm a warlock and you're a wizard or something like that. And I think that's another really cool aspect of it, is that personalization.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, as someone who streams, having organized information on the screen at all times, like you're seeing right here, just like the fact that the character's 10 feet up, right? And that there's just something glowing around them. People are, it's fun to stream when people watch, and you want someone to be scrolling through YouTube or Twitch and see your stream and see something that's visually cool and stimulating, but also just be able to jump into where the game is at right now. So like having the text up on the left side, having, I wish that I captured the frame a little bit better here, but just the order of the initiative on top there. It's awesome as someone who's broadcasting to have that stuff just like ready to rock, and as a DM not to have to program a whole bunch of stuff before the game, to just have it be working.
Well, just tips for people thinking about streaming, because this is the first time we streamed a one-shot. Atropos at the beginning, before we even started recording, said, hey, do you guys want to show health bars? I was like, I was kind of indifferent about it. He goes, well, the reason you want to do it is people tuning in can get an immediate assessment of how everyone's doing. Is anybody on death's door? That sort of thing. I was like, oh, that's fantastic. As far as like, information organization, it's a perfectly good reason to do that. So yeah, I think these things all kind of came together. And Joby, by the way, the setup for this has just exceeded all of my expectations. Can you give us a little broad strokes for everyone listening? What's your streaming setup? You're using OBS. Something's happening to get these this screen the way that we're seeing it now.
Sure. Yeah. So me and the familiars taught ourselves OBS, and our standard setup is 2 Foundry windows open, one for the DM and one as a player view, and we broadcast the player view. And then we usually use Zoom, and you can see the caps throughout the screen right there that are all individual screen caps. And then we're capping D&D Beyond for the combat log. Here's the Foundry combat log. We're probably going to be moving over to the Foundry combat log for reasons that we can discuss at another time. But it's a variety of screen caps, and we have a variety of, anybody who's familiar with OBS, we have a variety of scenes that are set up to be able to, just jump between, again, different frames. So if we're in a big role-playing section where there's not a lot happening on the map, we like to have, exactly. Like, we like to have everyone's faces there so that they can talk to each other, have a smaller combat log. And then I also do like to have the map in the background just to have a unity when we jump between scenes. But then, when stuff starts to go down, we have a smaller combat screen where it's a little bit in between. And when things in combat either are paused, somebody tries to stop the combat and start talking.
Yeah.
And get their way out of it. This is a good place to have this. But then I really like to have the big splashy one where you are really focused on the map and the information that's in Foundry. And, it's been a bunch of trial and error, but we've got it working pretty well. And I switch between them using Touch Portal. I know that a lot of people use the Elgato touch deck. But I personally like Touch Portal because it's $10 and you can get it on an iPad and it works just as good.
Is that what we're seeing down here in your screen? Is that you interfacing with Touch Portal?
That is the music. And so that is something that I do as well. So the music that I've been using is a combination of Monument Studios' really great collection of fantasy RPG music that you can get that has everything from hour-long, mood type tracks to shorter sort of scene-setting tracks, everything down to really awesome sounding swords and grunts and growls. And I'm also a musician, so I've got all this fun gadgetry, and what I'm using there is the Push 2 with Ableton. That's how I stream the music into Familiars, and I thought that it would be fun to do that with you guys. And what you can see me doing there is just switching between tracks, moving certain volume knobs up, certain volume knobs down. Sometimes I'm playing a little piano. And it was actually really fun to be able to just kind of focus on that and not also touch.
Oh gosh, I couldn't imagine doing that job and DMing, but the music was just as I was listening to it in edits, was just amazing. I mean, it really set the tone. So I mean, just everything that you brought to this just really made this session what it was.
Yeah, having to handle the streaming or the recording setup along with music, I think would have taken multiple years off of my life during this while I was DMing. So your work was incredibly appreciated.
Well, hopefully
hairs than I expected.
Oh, for sure. Well, hopefully everyone listening to this, if you have questions about the streaming setup, OBS, leave them in the comments, and I'll try to get Joby to pay attention to that. Yeah, definitely would love to learn more about how your setup is made this so great. Okay, so let's talk about. So we used a lot of technology. And we had this sort of AV setup. What else kind of was challenging about the setup, or what did setup generally look like? Maybe lessons learned, things that we did well, sort of ahead of the session. And I'll start with just one of the things that I did is I made all the tokens for everybody. I heard what their race and a couple of the particulars were, and then I went into Heroforge and I made. I actually pulled down from the community stuff. I just did searches for artillerist and stuff like that. And I found some great starting points, and I just customized them. And I shared the token images with the players ahead of time, and they got pretty excited about it. They're like, wow, this is way better than I would have done, with very little notice. And this was the day before that I was putting these together. And what I didn't tell them is, hey, by the way, I'm generating 3D models of all these, right? It cost me $7 or $8 a piece. But then they got to see their 3D avatars rendered in the 3D scene. I think it was just a really good emotional moment. So I thought that worked really well from a setup perspective. If you're a DM and you really want, I mean, the players, they have very few things they can get emotionally, invested in early on. And one of those things is their token and the artwork. So that was a win. And I think another thing that we did that I liked is we set up a 3D battle session. In fact, we had 2D and 3D battle sessions, just maps that they could join as we were kind of kicking things off. And we just gave them instructions on how do you, cast a spell and move around the map, things like that. And I think it really cut down a lot of the kind of, mistakes when we got into actual gameplay.
Yeah, that was a big thing I took from the game that I play in every week is there's a couple different like training camp sites that we can always navigate to within the scenes on that game. And we can try out our abilities, especially because most of us handle our own automation in that game. So I was, what better way for people to test and make sure things work on their characters than just giving them 2 different arenas to punch up on. I think it was some orc that I gave either 1 million HP or I set up so that he would heal off of all damage or something. So then everyone could test things. And I think that was very helpful.
Yeah, it was good.
I'm feeling that idea. It's a fantastic idea just to get folks accustomed to it when they can push buttons and they're not going to screw up the game. It's a great idea.
Yep. Thanks, Ted, if you're watching.
Now, Zephyr, we were scrambling last minute. We had code pushes from Ripper coming in to get animations working in 3D. We had a bunch of stuff. You mentioned what you would do over again if you had more time to prep. You had to do some work with the automations too, right? I mean, you had some prep work as a GM to do there.
Yeah, I was attempting to set up some of the different automation pieces for the characters and everything up until we were recording, basically. MIDI QOL and DAE have things that are in the SRD, but for some of the other features and spells and mechanics, I had to set some of that up manually. And that came through a little bit more with 3D. At the time, there wasn't the automatic assignment of 3D animations with automated animations. Wow, I said animations a lot there. So that wasn't automatic. I had to manually configure that, which I could do it just fine. Well, it did take me going in and setting some stuff up, so I had to kind of pick and choose my battles a little bit on what I thought was going to get used the most so that we could actually have that for this final encounter. So yeah, there's some setup there, and like I said, if I had a bit more time, then I think I would have asked for everyone's character sheets to be in about a week ahead of time. Then I could have made sure all of the animations looked really good. I think I picked a pretty good mix of targets, so to speak, so that we had kind of 80% of the things that were going to get used had nice animations to them in 3D. So I think it worked out pretty well, but I would have liked to have had a little bit more time to just double check everything and not be working up to the last minute.
Yeah, but that 80-20 rule is really what I think most GMs should be shooting for, right? Like I've gone down the rabbit hole of trying to get everything 100% right. And you just have such diminishing returns at that point. And it's funny, a week later or 2 weeks later, Ripper comes out with a bunch of automated stuff that you would have had it all set up for you. Isn't that life?
Yeah. And I think the more time, like you're absolutely right. I don't think I would have tried to get into the weeds of actually making sure every single thing was automated, but that would have given a little bit more time to make sure that I had the 80% covered and I had verified and tested all of it. There was some of it that it was kind of like, okay, I'm pretty sure I did this right. We'll see when we're live. So,
yeah. Well, I do want to talk about things that went wrong. Like, so for everybody listening, this was a 7-hour recording session, right? We were meeting for probably an hour before we even started the gameplay. And then we had a ton of plot and interactions that we cut out just to cut it down. But we also had like technical things that would happen, right? And so I want to unpack some of the technical stuff that happened, and maybe we'll kind of start eventually segue into that. But I wanted to talk to Swift about the 3D stuff. I mean, we're looking at this 3D scene here. This is something you built just for this one shot, right? And it exists now in the
well, yeah.
But how did you guys approach this idea of like, hey, we're going to actually do a 3D session, a 3D combat session, and what kind of, what went into that for you, challenges or otherwise?
For me, it was just making, since this would be like one of the first times that I would be seeing a 3D scene being used by someone who isn't me. I did try to make sure that everything would be nice and self-explanatory, and there'd be nothing in there that could, cause confusion or anything. Other than that, a few of the things in here didn't exist when I started making the map, so I had to go in and make a few props specifically for this map. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's great. Anything that you learned along the way? I know you experimented with doors, animating, and we had fog effects that we had a setting just to kind of segue also into like what were some of the challenges. We had some gray screens come up because of a setting we didn't have flipped on. Like, what can you unpack with some of that?
That was pretty interesting, yeah. Like I set it up so that there was the particle fog in the scene. So, they had the kind of creepy underground, undeadly fog type effect. And then that turned out to cause some problems due to some settings or other. And I hadn't even really considered that. So that was kind of good to find out what works and what doesn't work, obviously.
And there's something about like you can go in and test a scene over 10 minutes and everything works great. But when you're, 5 hours into a recording session and you've been running software and you've been running Foundry the whole time, its tolerance can also change over time too. Zephyr, what was the setting that we ended up realizing was causing the gray screen for some of the players?
I'll need to double check it, but I believe it was the enable shared context setting for 3D canvas. And we mentioned this in what will have come out a few days before this video, I believe, on a kind of optimizing and setting up for 3D combat video. And that's a setting that is used basically when you're running Fog of War. And even at this point, Ripper's probably made a patch for that I'm not aware of that kind of fixes it. But that was a setting where basically the camera would have issues. And so all we had to do to fix it in the moment was for people to hit refresh. But if we had had that setting off, then we probably wouldn't have had any of those issues. And in fact, at one point, thought it was the particle effects causing issues, but that wasn't even the main problem. It may have caused a little bit of frame rate loss, but that wasn't why we were getting those gray screens.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but it was great to play test this, like really put it through its paces and be able to discover that because without all of us running and the way we did, we wouldn't have found it. So anyway, which again, It's been resolved, but this is kind of the forefront that we're on, right? Is like how to run large scale battles using all this new technology, right?
Yeah.
It's coming out.
Yeah, and like you said,
it's absolutely new technology to all of us. So all this information about like problems, what goes well, what goes badly, is massively valuable.
Yeah, and like you said, Bailey, you can test this on your own for 10 minutes and see no problems, but that's really different from when you have 5 players and BBEG all slinging spells and effects in the middle of this 3D. That's a lot more taxing, even apart from, the whole 5 hours situation.
Yeah, that's right. So let's see. So other things that didn't work or that we would do differently again. I remember we had a couple of players that couldn't teleport automatically. We had some automatic teleports between scenes. Some of us did it just fine. A couple didn't. I don't know that we ever figure out why that happened. I don't know that we did. But yeah.
I had a couple theories, but I never ended up being able to fully test them. So I think there's some things I can tweak on the teleports to make those work better.
Yeah, but I think the point for any DM though is also like when one player it wasn't working, just be ready to drop a player into a scene, right? Be ready to bypass anything you've set up that's automated, and also think about as a GM turning off some things that you normally are giving your players power to control, and you control it instead. right? They can still see the effect, they can still get near it and interact with it. But being able to control it as a GM can keep you from having some surprises as you're going through your game.
I've got a question for you, Zephyr. As DM, how well did you feel you were able to navigate around to the scene when it was in 3D? I'm still getting used to that. I love it, and I think that there's a lot of functionality already built in to help the DM manage this, but this is a huge battle. How did you find it for you to like navigate between all of the NPCs that you were controlling and a spell that would go off? I don't know. I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah. Actually, I think in some ways it might have been easier for me than for some of the players. As GM, you can turn off this setting called the game camera that kind of sets a default camera view for you as a player. And with the GM, I had set up, there is alternative camera controls. That's one of the settings in 3D Canvas. And that remaps some of the pieces so that when you left click, you aren't moving the camera. And that's a really important one because, you know, when you're left clicking, you might accidentally select something and move it where you're not supposed to. And I think that happened at one point with a big tile, which caused a little bit of a concern. But I think having a familiarity with the camera controls, it actually works really well because you can double click on a token in the combat tracker and it will zoom right to them and you can then find the ones you want. So I think it was actually pretty easy for me to navigate in 3D actually. So it felt pretty good.
Nice.
That's great. Yeah, I only saw it from the you guys. I think this point of view is from my screen. I just loved being able to pan around and zoom and look at things from different angles. I don't know if you guys saw, some of you seen Ripper's got a first person view now. So you could like stand in the eyes of your token and assess what they have line of sight to and, you know, where things are. And I find that really interesting to be able to navigate around as a player, this 3-dimensional space.
Swift, your new video, I just watched it today about just the breakdown of, I don't know, what to expect when you're just jumping into your 3D scene, especially when it comes to the menu. That was super duper helpful and really clear. So I'd like to point anybody who's got questions about this as a DM to the most recent vid.
I have been pretty pleased with the positive feedback I've been getting for that. It's one of those things which, you know, seems to make sense. Is I don't really see anyone talking about all of these settings because there's quite a lot of them and none of them are particularly intuitive. So I thought, you know what, I'll just go through and explain every single one in some detail. And, you know, I'm glad that that's been really helpful for people.
It's helpful to me. Like, I've done a lot with 3D and I sat through that video going, oh, well, that's what that does. So
I had my newborn son on my chest and I was like, oh, that's the difference between HDRI and skyboxes.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
I was glad I was able to explain that one. That was probably, I'm not sure how I would, but yeah, I apparently managed it. So that's good.
No, it's brilliant. Other things we learned, I think, is Monk's active tile. So it was great to have Monk on here. He's such a great developer. He's got so many good tools that we all love to use. And you built some little fun interactions in here, Zephyr. And like we're looking at a scene now where there's something hidden under the ice. And I think it was fun for all of us to see it. I think one thing that we figured out was sometimes you want to share those discoveries to the rest of the players. And you had kind of had it set up where each player would sort of discover something. And I think there's a place for that. I think players like to be the ones who found something and tell other people about it. But as far as like everyone being around the table, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think this experience has really reinformed my view on how to use these kind of story elements with Monk's active tile triggers. It's awesome to have something where players can go discover it, but if it's a major plot point and not some cool side item or something like that, then I think I want to rewire those more so that it's giving me a pop-up as a GM so I can give description to the whole table, and then I can ask the player what they want to do and select an appropriate option from the dialogue to then make whatever effect I want to have happen, rather than having it just be for that one character, because that experience is awesome for that one character, but it's not as easy for the rest of the table to see it. So that was a really good experience to have, and it's good to keep in mind.
I would give 2 thumbs up to that.
Yeah. Yeah, how we tell the stories is the most important thing, right? And that's just a great storytelling thing to keep in mind for any GM. Is like, when do I want to have all the players participating in these discoveries? So I think we're getting pretty close to the end here, guys. Anybody else have anything else that you just kind of really struck you, or something that you think the other GMs listening to this would want to know as they're kind of thinking about Foundry and their next session?
Yeah, I think, this was my first time DMing in a good bit, and so there was definitely some rust, and I do want to make a note for everybody that, we've talked about how this was like a 7-hour recording session. I don't want anyone to think that it's because we had, over 3 hours of technical issues. We most certainly did not have that many technical issues. Again, knocking off a lot of rust, I greatly underestimated how much content I had into the story and everything. So there was a lot of learning experience for me on what things I would trim out for a one-shot in the future to keep this a bit of a tighter runtime. I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. We threw so much tech at this and so many last-minute things. I was pretty happy with the results. And for a one-shot, I mean, narrating and telling a story for a one-shot, I've never had to do it. So I don't know how you manage to even remotely keep pace, but that's hard. And that's what mostly ended up on the cutting room floor, is just a few hours of content running around the town and other stuff. So all in all, I was pretty happy with it. I will say that the biggest emotional moments, because that's really what we want to log as GMs, is like, how do we create these emotional moments, right? How do we leave our players leaving the table? And for me, it was some really great role play. Atropos is such a pro. Iron Monk just really brought, and Zephyr, I mean, your scary grandmother, just really had fun at the table, and I really love that. And so you can't top good role play, and that was super fun for me. But I would say that the other emotional moments were around Monk's Active Tiles and that little discovery and jumping into a 3D scene. The effects, right? It really does draw you into it as a player, and it really did kind of glue me to the action in between all of the other things, right?
Yeah, I agree. I would just also want to toss out that, there's a lot of options out there for people to play tabletop role-playing games online. And I've tried a lot of them. If you watch the history of the Familiars, you can see me try out a couple different ones. And just the fact that, just to give a little high five to the work you guys are doing with 3D, especially Swift, like, there was a time where I was like, well, am I going to do Tailspire? Am I going to do Foundry? Because Tailspire is so pretty, And the fact that we can now get awesome, emotional, like jaw-dropping moments in Foundry with this 3D stuff, with just literally like a scene that you can import from y'all's, menu of scenes now, and either just import it and use it, or customize it and have it look the way that it does and perform the way that it does and not crash computers, and then on top of that have all the functionality of Foundry and the modules that you can do, is just like top notch. I mean, Foundry is just taking the cake for me when it comes to this stuff now. So kudos, guys. I thank you for making the best VTT even better.
Yeah, well, thanks for telling good stories around it. I always enjoy watching your stream.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the VTT, fully functioning VTT with all of these abilities for automation and great ways to actually run the game attached to the 3D, is what makes Foundry really special right now. I've watched campaigns and stuff that use Tailspire, and they look gorgeous.
Sure.
But you don't get that same effect of, it gave me chills, pun very much intended, when in the big 3D scene, my big bad got to, with greater invisibility, cast Cone of Cold and catch the entire party in it. And it had the roles and the automation and everything, and I got to see the preview of the template and everything. And that's something that other VTTs offer in the same level of power. And so being able to combine the beauty of gorgeous 3D art and like the maps that Swift is making and these special effects, along with a very robust, very powerful tabletop that can be as automated or as unautomated as you want it to be, I think is where the magic really happens.
Yeah, you know, when I started with Foundry, I played with Roll20. I was like, oh my gosh, there's got to be something better. I think everybody's had that moment. But what I found with Foundry is it's so open. You know, we're talking about the OGL right now. We're talking about, closing systems and Wizards is gonna, they've shown a preview of the 3D VTT that they'll probably never launch, right? Or it'll be a long time away. And we'll probably be 2 years in, with really you've seen the state of the art now, but what's going to be like in a year from now? It's going to be crazy. And there's something about this open environment with Foundry that lets me not be encumbered, lets my imagination be totally unencumbered. I can pull AI in. There's a module for AI prompts that you can automatically generate things. It's just crazy. I love it. And I can't imagine trying to play in a sandbox that was less open than that.
Kind of scary.
Agreed.
Foundry, I think, just kind of knocks everything else out of the park at this point, and will continue to do so. I think the gap's just going to get wider as time goes on.
Well, and that's a good point. It's because of the faces that you're seeing on the screen right here. All inventors, tinkerers, artists, developers coming together with a vision of like, ooh, what if I could do this? And what if I could do that? So I love it. I love everything about it. Well, listen, guys, thanks so much for joining tonight. It was good to unpack that session. Everyone in the comments, listing other questions. We're happy to interact, keep this conversation going in the comments. If you'd like to see more content like this, let us know that also. More one-shots, whatever. More just behind the screen kind of unpacking of things, let us know. But in the meantime, everybody, thanks again for making it out tonight. And we'll see you on the next turn.
Thanks, Bailey. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.